So this is the agenda for today. First, we're going to review the Cal Grant Renewal Project, including the project background and how it ties into the Student Success Blueprint. We'll also discuss the issues that were identified with the former renewal process and how this simplification project addressed those issues. Then we'll provide an overview of the brand new Cal Grant renewal process and some other important changes. Finally, we'll walk through some scenarios with the help of our renewal simplification subcommittee. We were able to come up with lots of different scenarios that we tested for the last 3 weeks. Actually, I would say the last month we were testing and we were successfully able to run renewals this past Friday. So we'll talk more about that, including some frequently asked questions, the difference between a new versus a renewal student, and then how to handle those limited eligibility situations. So first, we want to discuss the Cal Grant Renewal Project. As I mentioned, this has been a year in the making. And we can't really talk Cal Grant Renewal Simplification without highlighting the Student Success Blueprint, which was adopted by CSAC in 2025. Under the leadership of our Executive Director, Dr. Daisy Gonzalez, CSAC has implemented these 3 areas as our guiding principles for our Student Success Blueprint goals. So we're aiming to provide equitable access to financial aid, to provide better support to students through their journey as they navigate financial aid and higher education, and of course to drive success by helping students complete their education and using data to inform our work. And we do all of these while aligning with California's economic and workforce goals. To view the entire blueprint, you can click the link at the bottom of this slide on your PDF copy. If you had registered for the webinar by about 1 p.m. today, you should have received an email with the PDF slide deck. And if not, you can always reach out to the training team. We'll give you our email at the end. Otherwise, if one of my training colleagues can enter the email address into the chat box, I would greatly appreciate it. Simplifying the renewal process was a collaborative effort between CSAC and our college segment partners. So over a year ago, we created a subcommittee that included CSAC staff and representatives from the UC, CSU, the California community colleges, and the private schools. So we had experts like yourselves, financial aid officers who are working in the schools and administering this program to guide us in these changes. This project specifically supports Goal 2, Outcome 2A of the Student Success Blueprint, which is to make the Cal Grant renewal process predictable and shorter, simplifying it for both schools and for students. So we also worked with segment representatives to rewrite the student communications. So the emails that students receive from us when they receive a renewal Cal Grant, because we understand that communications from CSAC can impact your call drivers, your email inquiries, and the foot traffic at your office. So it was very important that we collaborate with financial aid staff from all segments to compose student renewal notifications that were clear and informative. So when we started the subcommittee over a year ago, our objective was to streamline renewals and start with the 26-27 renewal cycle, which again, I'm happy to report we successfully ran last Friday. Now, the former Cal Grant renewal requirements were applicable to any awards that were renewed up through the current 25-26 year. As many of you are aware, renewal awards were usually processed as late as June or July. All prior year terms had to be satisfied with either a payment or a qualifying adjustment code before the student could get picked up for renewal. And finally, there were situations when a manual renewal reinstatement was required. So this occurred when a Cal Grant recipient renewed their FAFSA or their CADA after the prior year's final reconciliation deadline in August. Now, those students were not auto-renewed through our system. Instead, the school would have to contact CSAC school support for a manual reinstatement. So this was really how the formal renewal process worked. The most key items being these three here: that later timeline, requiring that all terms are satisfied, and the inability to auto-renew students who filed their FAFSA or CADA much later. So now let's move on and talk about those specific issues that we identified with this former process. So the subcommittee came together and we were able to identify those pain points where schools and students were getting hung up in Cal Grant renewals. So first, with that later timeline, students were getting their renewal notifications much too late in the year. Usually by springtime, schools are packaging their continuing students, and Cal Grant awards were not yet available for the following year if the student was a renewal. Those students had insufficient time to plan for next year. They may be unsure if they'd have the Cal Grant to cover their tuition or the access or the books and supplies funds to, purchase their school supplies. Also, this kind of put schools in a position where they had to package students with estimated Cal Grant awards, and that adds to your workload, and then, of course, the potential for estimates that may have been slightly off. Other issues we found with the all terms satisfied requirement was that it put pressure on schools to fully reconcile before their students could be renewed. And that's going to cause issues for schools that are running up against that year-end reconciliation deadline. They're trying to prepare for the new year, get all of their students packaged accurately. So there are a lot of barriers and delays because of this. It also caused delays for partial year or mid-year transfer students when not all terms were yet satisfied. When I was a Cal Grant coordinator years ago at a CSU and at a community college, I know that I had mid-year students who would join in the spring for which I could make a payment, but I'd still have to go back in and post a transaction for fall. Otherwise, they would not get renewed. And with your heavy workloads and your number of students, this can definitely cause a lot of delays for both schools and students. So there were major issues with this requirement. And then finally, it goes without saying, the manual renewal reinstatement requirement for those late FAFSA and CADA filers was definitely a barrier. If students didn't realize that their Cal Grant was not auto-renewed, if they filed late, they could potentially lose out on that award. For students that submitted their FAFSA or CADA after that prior year's reconciliation deadline in August, either they would have to contact CSAC or the school would have to contact school support and complete that manual reinstatement. So this created many roadblocks. So it meant that there was an influx of manual award reinstatements for CSAC staff, and then the schools were waiting on us to do that. So overall, it just caused significant delays for eligible students. Keeping all of those issues in mind, we refined and simplified the Cal Grant renewal process so that we wouldn't run into those issues anymore. And so moving forward, starting with renewal awards for 26-27, we now have an earlier timeline. So renewal awards are going to be processed as early as March or April. Our goal for this implementation year was to have renewals run by April, but we were very happy that testing went very well, and we were actually able to run renewal awards in production last Friday. So luckily, we have a much earlier renewal roster. And I was just checking in web grants today. I see lots of schools have renewal students already on their roster. Of course, that is not yet open for payment, but it is open for school changes and other things that you need in order to accurately process your students' financial aid packages. I'm so happy to see all of the clapping and the hearts because I'm with you. I was thrilled that this was part of the plan and that it worked. So I'm really glad to see that this is going to be helpful for you all. Another piece of good news. We now only require one term to be satisfied in order for a Cal Grant to renew. No more having to fully reconcile a student before they can renew for the following year. Just one term satisfied. We were trying to get as close as we could to mirror the Pell Grant, where Pell Grant will renew even if there's no transactions for the prior year. I'll talk more about why we went with one term satisfied in a few slides. But overall, as a subcommittee, we determined that this was the best course of action to ensure that we get renewals much earlier and that it makes it easier for schools and for students. And then finally, no more manual reinstatements. We are continuing auto renewal through June 30th. So for those really late FAFSA or CADA filers who are submitting their applications after that year-end reconciliation deadline in August, there's no need to call us to manually renew those. They're going to be picked up in our weekly job, and no manual reinstatement is needed. We're going to discuss each of these changes in more detail in the next few slides. So with that earlier renewal timeline, this was one of the solutions that came about because of all the issues it caused. So with renewal awards for 26-27 having been processed on Friday, March 27th, you can now go into your school's roster for next year, and you could possibly see renewal students already there. Now, in future years, we will continue this practice, running the renewal cycle as early as March. The benefits from moving this timeline up to March is that it allows continuing students to receive a more accurate award package. Schools, you're not having to necessarily calculate estimated Cal Grant awards. It depends on of course, how early you are packaging your students, but I hope that for the majority of your schools, this will no longer be needed because your renewals will be available in March rather than in June or July. There's also going to be less interference with schools trying to complete year-end reconciliation, packaging for new students. And so we hope that this earlier timeline is going to benefit you in many ways, as we know it'll definitely benefit our students. As I mentioned before, we did rewrite our renewal notifications to students, which have gone out. With the help of our representatives from all the different segments on our subcommittee, we were able to rewrite those notifications so that they're definitely more clear and easy to understand, which will hopefully also reduce your call drivers and your foot traffic in your offices. This is probably my favorite part of the renewal simplification project because of the issues it caused for schools and the delay it caused for students. We are now moving forward with only one term having to be satisfied in order for a Cal Grant to be picked up for renewal. The difference in what is required is going to depend on if the student is in their initial award year or if they're in a renewal year. I'll talk more about how to identify those students. Knowing the difference is going to be crucial. You'll need to be able to identify easily which students are considered to be new and which students are considered to be renewal so that you can better plan for how to get them picked up for renewal for the next year. So let's first talk about students in their initial award year. So for the purposes of this example, I would be talking about students who are brand new Cal Grant recipients for the 25-26 academic year. For these students, they require at least one payment or O code. Payment codes like PD, full-time, three-quarter time, or half-time must be $1 or greater. Cannot be $0. But if the student is receiving outside funding, you can use an O code as you have in the past, an OF, an OT, or an OH of $0 or more. That would be an acceptable qualifying transaction. Now, this rule applies to all cycles. We used to have this requirement for just E2 and E3, that they received at least one payment. But going forward, this is going to apply for all new students under every Cal Grant Award cycle. Now, this change complies with California Education Code, subsection 69433.5, where it states, the Cal Grant recipient shall remain eligible for award renewal only if he or she is a California resident, in attendance, and making satisfactory academic progress at a qualifying institution. The key word in the Ed Code here is recipient. So they have to receive at least one payment in that initial award year in order to get picked up for renewal for year two. If you're going to use a payment code, make sure it's the award is $1 or greater. And if you're going to use an O code, a $0 payment is acceptable because that indicates that they are enrolled and they could receive Cal Grant, but they're receiving outside funding, which may cause them to, not have enough room for Cal Grant. There could be other reasons. So these are the new rules going forward, including for any students that were picked up for the renewal cycle that happened on Friday. Now let's talk about the rules for renewal year students. These are students who would be identified on your Cal Grant roster as R, or renewal. Now these students also only need one term satisfied, but that term can be satisfied with a payment, an O code, or a qualifying adjustment code. Those qualifying adjustment codes, as they have been in the past, are going to include leave of absence, LA, not meeting satisfactory academic progress, or NP, or less than half time, LH. These codes indicate that either the student was enrolled but not eligible to receive a payment for the renewal year, or they're taking a term off. Those codes alone would satisfy renewal, but we will talk about certain implications as we go into the renewal scenarios, so stay tuned for those. And again, this is also applicable to all cycles, so any renewal student under any of the 5 cycles listed here must have at least one term satisfied with a payment, an O code, or a qualifying adjustment code. Over the next 2 slides, we're going to show you in detail which codes would satisfy renewal for either new students or renewal students. So for students in their initial award year, these are the qualifying renewal codes that alone would satisfy renewal. PD is your full-time quick pay code, which is going to use 50% semester eligibility or 33.33% quarter eligibility. We also have the adjusted pay codes, which include full-time, three-quarter time, or half-time, which will always use eligibility. As I mentioned before, if the student is enrolled but maybe cannot receive Cal Grant because they have other outside funding, like maybe a scholarship or a fee waiver, make sure that you are using an O code, because you can report an O code with a $0 payment, which will actually use 0% of their lifetime eligibility. If you report any amount greater than $1 or $1 or greater, it will use eligibility. But for the purposes of renewal, it does satisfy that one term requirement, OF, OT, or OH. So I recommend saving that PDF that we sent you either this morning or this afternoon. Print this screen out, have it available. These are the codes that are going to be able to satisfy for a student in their initial award year. Now, for students in their renewal year, they can also be picked up for renewal if they have a PD, FT, TT, HT for those payment codes. The O codes are also applicable. The difference between your new students and your renewal students is that these adjustment codes are also eligible. LH, which means the student is enrolled, but they're less than half time and not eligible for a payment. That lifetime maximum LH eligibility is still 100%. That has not changed. So the student cannot use LH more than 2 semesters or more than 3/4. Another code that will satisfy renewal for students in a renewal year is a leave of absence, LA. It can be posted by the school or it can be posted by the student. Still, the maximum 200% lifetime limit does apply. So keep that in mind if you are using LA. And we'll talk a lot more about the difference between using an LA versus leaving a term blank. So we will talk more about that. And finally, NP, not meeting SAP. This is also a code that will allow a renewal student to get picked up for the next year. But keep in mind that 3 consecutive NP codes will withdraw the award. So be mindful of that although it does count for renewal, they cannot have 3 or more in a row. Now continue asking your questions in the Q&A box. I do see that there are some questions coming in. It looks like they've all been answered already. Thank you so much to my team of trainers for taking care of those. So again, we have still a half an hour left in the webinar, so feel free to type your questions into the Q&A. Now let's talk a little more about that auto renewal through June 30th change. This is brand new for the renewal simplification process. Remember, in prior years, we withdrew awards at year-end reconciliation if we had no FAFSA or CADA on file. So last year, going from 24-25 and renewing for 25-26, at that August reconciliation deadline, if we had no FAFSA or CADA on file, we withdrew the award, and in order for that student to be renewed, the student or the school would have to contact CSAC staff to do a manual reinstatement. No more. Moving forward, beginning with 26-27 renewals, we will continue auto-renewing students through June 30th of next year, once a valid ICER is received. Now, please keep in mind, though, that we must have a valid ICER on file and the student must meet all other Cal Grant requirements to renew. So this is still going to include that they meet income and asset ceilings, they have enough unmet need, California residency, and they have at least 10% eligibility remaining. Students with less than 10% eligibility remaining will be withdrawn for the following year. They're not eligible for renewal. The great news is, of course, here is that there's no need for manual reinstatement. Once there's a valid ICER received, we will run our weekend process and the student can get picked up for renewal all the way through June 30th. This better aligns with federal student aid and their requirement of having a FAFSA on file by June 30th. Now let's move into some additional changes before we talk scenarios. So there were some enhancements made to our existing reports. One of the reports that you probably use quite often is the accept reject report. This report will list all of your attempted transactions and payments from the previous cycle. And when I say cycle, I mean that we now process Cal Grant payments twice per week, Wednesday nights and Friday nights. And so you can run this report twice per week to see which of your transactions were accepted and then which were rejected. Now, moving forward into 26-27, we have a new reject transaction code, 6760, and this is specifically for students whose current year payments were rejected because they are missing an eligible payment or qualifying transaction in their initial award year. We do have a scenario in a few moments that will walk through this, but here's a quick example. When a school reports a payment for the prior award year, like 25-26, but later reverses that payment after the student was already renewed for a forward award year, like 26-27, if they've pulled that payment back and the student is no longer eligible for renewal, the school is going to see this reject code if they try to make a payment. Like I said, we have a scenario all on this, and it will probably make more sense with a better visual. So we'll come back to that in a bit. Another enhancement was made to the unable to determine renewal eligibility report. This report shows all awardees that are missing an eligible renewal transaction for at least one term. So prior to 26-27, this report would show you a list of students who did not have all terms satisfied. It would show you the student's name, their social, their award type, and it would show you which terms were not satisfied. But moving forward, your 26-27 report will list all students who are missing at least one satisfied term for 25-26. That's going to include your new awardees from this year without at least one payment or O code, and it'll list your renewal awardees for this year without at least one payment, one O code, or at least one qualifying transaction code. I did go through a few schools today to see if their report was generating, and I did see already you have these reports available. Just make sure that you're running it for the 26-27 year to see which students are still missing a transaction for the current year. There are also ways to identify unpaid students by customizing your roster, so we'll also talk about that in a bit as well. Another really important new change is that starting in 26-27, education level verification is going to be required prior to payment for any term, not just for any term after fall. So the current year, you may have been able to post fall payments for students that had a EL verification flag. It would allow you to post for fall, but then any subsequent terms would be rejected. Moving forward into next year, schools are going to be required to verify EL for students selected before posting any payments. Now, this change allows CSAC to run renewals much earlier in the year. This change also helps alleviate any issues that may have come up whenever you posted a fall payment for a student who may have the wrong EL. To give you an example, let's say you had a student come in on your Cal Grant B roster. They had a tuition and fee award as well as an access award. They were selected for EL verification, but you posted a fall payment. Come winter or spring, perhaps you go in and using your own school's policy, you discover that the student is actually considered to be a first-year freshman. That would mean you would have to pull back that fall tuition and fee award because, as many of you know, with the exception of the top 2% in California, Cal Grant B recipients are only eligible for access in their first year. So that could cause some issues where students would have to repay back that tuition award. So this will help alleviate any of those potential risks. You can identify a student needing uh, education level verification. Not all new students or new awardees are required. It's going to depend on which cycle they're awarded under, as well as what EL they reported on their FAFSA or CADA. Here, you're going to see reported EL is the self-reported education level by the student on their FAFSA or CADA. Their status could show a status of 2, which is not yet paid, verification required. That means the award is on hold. To remove the hold, you'll want to verify their EL, whether they're a first year, second year, and so on, or perhaps they have a bachelor's degree or you're unable to verify. Keep in mind that EL verification that is verified by the school will process over the weekend. So if you're trying to make a fall payment and you verified the EL, you'll be able to post a payment the following week. Just keep an eye out on your education level verification report, which we're going to talk about on the next slide. So this report is available and allows schools to run a list of all students who still need EL verification. To obtain this report, you'll use the Cal Grant data transfer link and select Report Download. This report is going to list all students needing EL verification. On this report, you'll see this column here has their self-reported ed level from their FAFSA or CADA. This column will show their EL status code. A code of 2 means that they're not yet paid and verification is required. Again, that means the award is on hold. A code of 5 means unable to verify, which will also prevent you from paying. There is a code of 6, which is paid and verification required, which, as many of you have seen, are maybe on your current report, because as of this year, you can still make at least one payment before verifying EL. But as of next year, you will no longer see this status on your report because all students will require EL to be verified if they're selected before any payments can be posted. Keep in mind that you can also customize your Cal Grant roster to identify any students needing EL verification. The report is very useful, but if you prefer, you can customize that roster. We actually have a really helpful video on how to customize your Cal Grant roster. It's on our website, so feel free to watch that if you need a quick refresher. Now we're going to move on to Cal Grant renewal scenarios. Feel free to participate in the chat if you are, starting to understand all of the changes and you want to kind of test your knowledge. So this first scenario that we have is a new awardee. And how do I know that? The student is marked as N under new/renewal on the Cal Grant roster. And just so that you're aware, this is the 25-26 Cal Grant roster. So this is a new student. They entered the program this year, 25-26, as a second-year sophomore, and they were given 300% eligibility. The school posted a 3/4 time payment for fall of 2025. Being that this is a semester school, it used up 37.5% eligibility. Now, by the time CSAC runs the renewal cycle in March of 2026, the school has not yet posted a spring payment. The question is, will the student's Cal Grant get picked up for renewal? If you want to test your knowledge and take a shot at it, let me know in the chat. Tina says yes. Marcella also says yes. Jessica, Rochelle, great job. Yes. Moving forward, this new student in their initial award year only needs one term satisfied with a payment or an O code to be renewed. Very good. We'll talk again about those blank terms and what it could mean potentially moving forward. Scenario number 2, we're talking again about a new awardee. On 25-26, I see an N under this column here. This new Cal Grant awardee entered the program this year. as a first-year freshman with 400% eligibility. Now, the student, as some students do, decided to take a gap year, and they placed their Cal Grant on a leave of absence for both fall and spring at their school of choice. The student, by the end of the year, has not received any Cal Grant payment at any school. Now, will this student's Cal Grant get picked up for renewal? Go ahead and let me know in the chat what you think. Patsy says no. Adeline says no. Jermaine says, I believe so, but gulp. So he's nervous, right? It's a lot of new information, and you all are doing amazing. It's a lot to get used to, especially if you've been administering Cal Grant for a long time. No, this is a new student, and in their initial award year, they must have at least one term satisfied with a payment or an O code to be renewed. This is applicable to all Cal Grant cycles. I will talk a little more about new E1 students and how they can still qualify for an additional year. And so we are advising students that if they are planning to take a gap year after high school graduation and they receive a Cal Grant award, there are things they can do to ensure that they get considered again as a new awardee in a future year. Things like making sure to file their FAFSA or CADA by March 2nd, or whatever that deadline might be that year. Ensuring that they have a verified GPA on file if they're going for a Cal Grant A or B, and so on. Let's look at a renewal awardee. This is scenario number 3. Again, we're in the 25-26 year roster. This is a renewal student because they have an R listed under this column. They were first awarded Cal Grant in 24-25. They were renewed for 25-26 with 300.01% remaining. The student is found to not be meeting SAP for fall. The student decides to stay enrolled for fall, but he also decides not to submit a SAP appeal. So the school reports NP for fall of 2025. The student then decides to take the winter and spring terms off from school just to take a break. So the school leaves the Cal Grant terms blank. Now, what do you all think? Will this student's Cal Grant get picked up for renewal? He's already in a renewal year. He's not a new awardee, and he has an NP code for fall and blank terms for winter and spring. Tina and Marcella, quick, yes. Magdalena, yes. Patsy, yes. You are all correct. This student is a renewal recipient. They only need one term satisfied with a payment, O code, or that qualifying transaction. NP counts. One transaction code, or there's a few, but I'll give you a few examples of codes that alone would not satisfy renewal for a student in a renewal year. Things like file incomplete, FI, that does not satisfy renewal. School change, if you do an SC but never report a payment, that will not satisfy renewal, and so on. So really the only 3 codes that would count alone, like this scenario, are LA, NP, and LH. Let's look at a student with limited eligibility, because these are usually a little trickier. This is a renewal student for 25-26. They're marked here as an R. And they are renewed for 25-26 with 50.01% eligibility. The school posts a full-time payment for fall, and that's going to use 33.33% eligibility because it's a quarter school. CSAC then runs the renewal cycle in March of 2026. Since at least one term was satisfied for 25-26, the student's award is renewed, and for 26-27, they have their remaining 16.68% front-loaded to fall. Okay, so because we're running the renewal cycle much earlier, they're going to get picked up and renewed with that last remaining eligibility. And also keep in mind, students need at least 10% or more to get renewed. This student is okay. They had 16.68% left. Now, we're going to continue this scenario. Let's go back to 25-26. Now that the renewal process has been run, the school now goes in and posts a full-time payment for the winter 2026 quarter, thus using that last 16.68%. As a result, the student's Cal Grant is going to be withdrawn for both 25-26 and 26-27. Because remember, we renewed them with that final 16.68%, but then the school went back in and posted a payment for winter, which is perfectly fine. It's just we wanted to illustrate what this would look like in your Web Grants portal if the situation were to come up. The student's award summary is going to display a disqualification code of 30 for that renewal year, 26-27. Now, another good piece of news that we do have for you, I was really excited about this, and I just wanted to give you all a heads up, is that when we withdraw a student because they've reached their maximum eligibility, you may recall that when you're reconciling and if you need to make an adjustment to a payment, you can't because the award is withdrawn. It's locked. So what do? You call CSAC school support or you email school support and ask for the roster to be reopened. I did this so many times that I had the CSAC school support phone number memorized. So the new change going forward next year is that when an award is withdrawn, you can still make changes. It's not going to allow you to over-award the student past their eligibility. But if you needed to go in and make adjustments because maybe the student dropped to three-quarter time after census or before census, sorry. But there always is a reason why you may need to adjust. And so the roster will still be open for you to make adjustments. It'll just show that the student's award has been withdrawn. I see so many clapping hands. I feel the same way when we talked about this in the subcommittee, I was clapping along with you. So that is wonderful, really good news. So just so you're aware, that is another good change coming. But in this scenario, the student would be withdrawn for 26-27, and then no payments would be allowed, because this can happen. One more scenario, and then we'll talk about some FAQs. In this scenario number 5, in August 2025, we're kind of going to go through a timeline here. August 25, we had a recent high school graduate, class of 2025, was awarded a new E1 high school entitlement Cal Grant for 25-26. The student then enrolls in 12 units for fall, so the school reports a full-time payment for fall. Great. In January of 2026, the student enrolls in less than 6 units for spring, so the school reports a less than half-time payment, or LH, for spring. So far, so good. Come March, CSAC runs renewals for 26-27. Since the student had at least one term satisfied with a payment or an O code, in this case, that FT for fall, their award was renewed for 26-27. Now come August. The school is doing their final reconciliation, and let's just say in this scenario, the school had to back out the student's fall 2025 payment. There could be a myriad of reasons. One reason I can think of off the top of my head is maybe the student turned out not to be eligible for Cal Grant. Maybe they were later selected for verification and didn't get all their paperwork in. There could be a number of reasons. If the school backed out the only term satisfied with a payment, any 26-27 payment attempts will be rejected with that 6760 reject code I talked about. This is scenario 5 continued. So keep in mind that there's a very short time frame when the Cal Grant roster is open for 2 academic years. For example, come August, there may be a short time when 25-26 and 26-27 are both open. So if the school in this scenario backed out the only qualifying 25-26 payment and then tries to post a payment for the following year, they're going to see this reject reason. Not only will this appear on the roster, But if they are maybe doing a upload, like their system is automated, the reject reason will also appear on their accept reject report. So this is that new reject reason I mentioned earlier, and this is when you would see it, is when the student was renewed because at the time they had an eligible payment, but then later on the school backs it out. The student's still going to appear on that 26-27 roster, but it's going to be rejected. Any payment will be rejected. Okay? And continue asking your questions in the Q&A box. Please feel free. Now's the time. We're going to move into the last part of the webinar, the last 10 minutes or so, with some frequently asked questions. So the first question is, if schools can leave terms blank, why would a student or a school ever need to use the leave of absence or LA code? It's a great question, because in the past, sometimes in order to make a payment for a subsequent term, you had to post something. And if your student wasn't enrolled at your school or anywhere else for a previous term, what did you use? LA. So if we can leave terms blank now, what is the purpose? The LA code is still going to be appropriate in certain situations. So think about this example. Let's say you have a student who is considered a renewal for the year. That means they're awarded in a year that is after their initial award year. Just one term of the LA can be used to renew their Cal Grant for the following year. So let's give you an example. Here's a renewal student who maybe is taking a year off. Post LA for just one term, and that will allow the Cal Grant to get picked up for renewal for the following year. That maintains their Cal Grant eligibility. This is when LA would be appropriate, but you're going to find that with the new enhancements, you're going to use LA a lot less, which is good. Okay, here's another question. Student was a new mid-year transfer to our school. The student was not enrolled at any other school in the fall. Do we need to post a leave of absence for fall before posting a winter or spring payment? The answer is that with renewal simplification, a term may be left blank if the student was not enrolled. But I do want to give you this caveat, and this is really important because I don't want any of you to be confused when you go into your 25-26 roster and try this method. The system logic for posting payments and web grants was not changed for 25-26. And the reason is because we couldn't change logic mid-year. It would mess things up. So just for this year, for 25-26, you may still have some students that require a fall transaction like LA before you can post a winter or spring payment. We know this. Few of the trainers here with me in this webinar were part of the testing team, and we saw this scenario come up where in the 25-26 roster, you may still get this reject reason, no transaction reported for fall terms. This is only for 25-26, and it's only because we could not change the logic mid-year. But going forward, this reject reason will no longer pop up. 26, 27, and beyond, you can leave fall blank and you can post a winter or spring payment, whether the student is new or renewal. This is, again, great news for your partial year students or your new mid-year transfer students. You don't have to apply that fall LA in order for your winter or spring payment to be accepted. So please just remember 25-26, the renewals picked up successfully, but that you may still have some lingering students who still require this, but only for this year. Next year, it's all going to be updated. I mean, it already is in our system. It's just you won't see it until the roster opens for next year. Okay, here is a question about a recent high school graduate who was awarded a new E1 High School Entitlement Award for 25-26. However, the student did not receive at least one payment or O-code in that year. Can they be considered for new E1 again for next year? So some of you may not know this, But prior year high school graduates have an additional year to qualify for a new E1 Cal Grant. To give you an example, let's say you had a senior class of 2025, graduated in June of 25, and maybe they received a new E1 for 25-26, but didn't use it. They can still be considered for one more year for 26-27 for that new E1 as long as they have a valid FAFSA or CADA and a verified high school GPA submitted by the March 2nd deadline. One other little caveat is that eligible foster youth can actually qualify with these items up through age 26. So I just wanted to add that in case you weren't aware that foster youth have an expanded E1 eligibility. So if you have those recent high school grads who receive a Cal Grant award but decide to take a gap year, they still have another opportunity to get a new E1. They just have to make sure that they submit their application and their verified high school GPA by March 2nd. Here's a question about Community College Reserve, or CCR. Do Cal Grant A recipients on CCR need at least one payment, O-code, or qualifying transaction to renew? The answer here is no, that if the student has a Cal Grant A and they're attending a community college, they're going to be on CCR. So they can continue to get renewed without a payment, without an O-code, or a qualifying transaction. However, if the student is attending a community college and they are receiving Cal Grant A for students with dependents, and they've been certified as eligible for the Increased Access Award, they are required to have at least one term satisfied. And the reason is because they're eligible for payment. Those of you from community colleges, you know that you're already paying Cal Grant A recipients only if they have SWD or FYA, right, foster youth access. These students are required to have at least one term satisfied because they're not technically on CCR, they're in your eligible roster. So keep that in mind. But otherwise, your traditional Cal Grant A recipients, if they're on CCR, they can get renewed as long as they meet income and asset ceilings. We are checking for that every year moving forward. So in order to remain on CCR, you still have to meet income and asset requirements. And that wraps up our frequently asked questions and our webinar. I just wanted to remind you to register for our CSAC listserv. I imagine that if you're here today, you probably are already registered because we announced this in a GSA. But just in case, let your colleagues know that we communicate with schools via this listserv. It's like our newsletter, our email list. So you can register by clicking the link at the bottom of the slide on your PDF version. And we send out updates on legislative changes, system maintenance, outages, any deadlines, and training and outreach events. And then finally, if you need to contact us after today's webinar, for example, if you need a copy of the slide deck in PDF form today, you can email us at training@csac.ca.gov. If you have questions as a school employee, you can contact school support either by email or by phone. And of course, if your students and families have questions, they can contact us at CSAC Student Support. We do have 1 minute, so I can take one live question since we are just now at 3 o'clock. If someone would like to raise their hand, let me see if we already have someone with their hand raised. So I'm going to stop my recording. 1 moment.